My name is Heather Gray, and the program is Just Peace, and I'm wanting to welcome you all to our program this evening. I'm looking forward to this. We're going to be talking with Greg Palast. But I'm here in the studio with Ernest Dunkley, co-producer Ernest Dunkley, and I want to give a little bit of an intro here to Greg, or of Greg. Greg Palast is the author of several New York Times bestsellers, including The Best Democracy Money Can Buy and Armed Madhouse. You know Palast through his investigative reports for BBC Television, The Guardian, Democracy Now!, and Rolling Stone. This week, Palast released the post-election update of his film, The Best Democracy Money Can Buy, The Case of Stolen Election. Now, the first time I knew of Greg was when you were involved, actually, with what was happening in Florida in 2000, that Gore-Bush debacle. Right. So that was really something.
So why am I here in Atlanta?
Well, but the thing is, I do want to mention, before you go into that, is that you kept it up.
Yeah, that's the problem, isn't it?
Because
that is the vote thieves have kept it up too. In 2000, if you don't know Greg Palast, if you don't know me, I'm the reporter who, for BBC Television and The Guardian, uncovered how Jeb Bush and Katherine Harris removed tens of thousands of black folk from the voter rolls of Florida, and that's what elected George W. Bush as president. They called 58,000 black men felons who couldn't vote in Florida. In fact, their only crime was being they were guilty of voting while black. There was not one, and I want to emphasize, it's not one person on that list who was in fact an illegal voter, but they had removed all those people by falsely claiming that they were felons, 58,000 people, and George W. Bush became president of the United States by just 537 votes, not counting those black men.
Right.
Now, here's the thing. We're back here with the same story. I am in Atlanta tonight, because tomorrow I'm holding a press conference announcing that I am suing your Katherine Harris, Secretary of State Brian Kemp, for once again removing voters of color illegally, wrongly, through trickery. And I'm suing him because I'm suing him to open up the files. And I'm suing him. My co-plaintiffs include Helen Butler of the Kemp. It's the Georgia Coalition for what is it? I get the name.
We'll get it. Go ahead.
And Helen Butler.
So great leader on voting rights.
What is the name of her organization?
I'm going to get that in
okay.
a moment.
Well, it's always a difficult start. NSA UFOT of the New Georgia Project. I just found out just now we're going to have the NAACP there, and of course it's going to be hosted by the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, Dr. Charles Steele.
Right.
And we will also have the great Joe Beasley, who is the Southern States Director for my friend, the Reverend Jesse Jackson. Now, Jesse Jackson is my co-plaintiff against the Secretary of State of Illinois, who's playing these same games. In fact, I'm suing in over 20 states because Katherine Harris's creepy system of removing black voters from the voter rolls has taken on a different form, and it's happening in more than 20 Republican-controlled states. And I'm suing Brian Kemp because he has stonewalled me under the National Voter Registration Act. He stonewalled me getting the information I need to do this investigation. Now, this investigation began with Al Jazeera, moved over to Rolling Stone, where I was an investigative reporter, and Democracy Now! Bless you for giving me a home here in Georgia for me and Amy.
Absolutely.
And then it's gone on not only from Rolling Stone and Democracy Now!, but also in the film The Best Democracy Money Can Buy, in which I describe this trick. A lot of the film The Best Democracy Money Can Buy is filmed here in Georgia, where there's been mass purging of voters. As you listen to this, about an hour ago, I put up on my website, gregpalast.com. Go to GREGPALAST. As we are speaking, I want you to do that right now. Go to gregpalast.com, type in your first name and your last name and your zip code. And we're going to tell you if you've been purged from the voter rolls by Brian Kemp. He does not send you a notice. I want to repeat that. If you've been removed from the voter rolls of Georgia and you think you're going to vote on November 6th, think again. 1 in 10 voters, 1 in 10 were removed last year, and none of them were given any notice. So I'm warning you right now, everyone you know, make sure that everyone in your family, make sure every one of your friends goes to Greg Palast, that's GregPalast, gregpalast.com, and type in your first name, last name right at the top of the site, and we'll send you back a note saying, yes, you've been canceled, your registration has been canceled, or no, it hasn't. If it's canceled, you've got 1 week to re-register. I would do it right now because they don't necessarily put you on right away. Re-register and do something else. Send me a note saying, Greg, they took me off the voter rolls. So just say, yes, I want to know who you are. I want to meet you and I want you to spread the word. Tell other people, go to gregpalast.com and look for your name. You have 1 week to re-register. Now dig this. Brian Kemp has removed over 500,000 voters on the grounds that they've left the state. Well, as we speak, I have my computer experts, some of whom, by the way, work under contract to the post office. So we're getting the best information you can get. And we're finding thousands and thousands and thousands of people have not moved from the state of Georgia, have not moved from the address they've registered, or in some case, I found one where a woman moved from one apartment in her building to another apartment, and Brian Kemp took away her voter registration. That's illegal.
Wow.
And they also did this. Kemp was removing people from within the, you move down the street in the same zip code, and you lose your vote. You're not supposed to. You're told that if you simply move down the street, if you're in the same congressional district, you don't have to re-register. But what happened is he's using a system. Brian Kemp's using a system created by a guy named Chris Kobach of Kansas. If you can't remember Chris Kobach of Kansas, just think KKK. This guy, Chris Kobach of Kansas, he is Trump's vote thief in chief. He's the guy, he's the Purgeon General of the United States. He worked with Trump to get Trump elected by coming up with a system. He's Secretary of State of Kansas. He got Brian Kemp and a bunch of other GOP secretaries of state to send him in Kansas your entire voter file of the state of Georgia and 25 other states. He then checks those voter files and looks for people who are registered in 2 states. What you're not allowed to do is register in 2 different states. Well, that's simple. But here's who he says have registered in 2 states. And you'll see in my film, The Best Democracy Money Can Buy. In 2 states you have, for example, Maria Hernandez. There's a Maria Hernandez in Georgia. A Maria Inez Hernandez in Georgia. There's also Maria Cristina Hernandez in Louisiana. And according to Brian Kemp, according to Chris Kobach of Kansas, that's the same voter. Because it's obvious Maria Hernandez got to be the same voter, even though it's different middle names. Now, if you think that's
that's
small,
just the most amazing thing that they're not looking at the middle names at all. I mean, I know that's what they were also doing in Florida and consistently across the country when they've been doing this, right, Greg?
yes. And so what's happened
it's just incredible.
So I am filing lawsuits in all these states.
Wow.
And I'm working with some of the best voting rights attorneys in America. And, the problem is trying to get this stuff in the press here. That's why I thank you. And I won't. I had a TV station that was interviewing me
Today, right?
And the first thing is they called Brian Kemp's office.
Oh, they did.
And believe it or not, Kemp's office denies it. So they don't want to run the story because Kemp says it's not true.
Oh, is that right?
Well, what do you think they're going to say? In Britain, I worked for the BBC. We used to call this,
right.
the Mandy Rice Davies effect, because now when I was with BBC,
right.
If I came back and I said, well, there's no story here because the government official denied it, I'd lose my job, okay? But here, it's like, well, now the accuser, Mandy Rice Davies was the woman who accused Perfumo, if you remember the Perfumo scandal, where she was basically a hooker sleeping with KGB agents and British ministers and passing information back and forth. And they said, well, the minister denied what you're saying to Mandy when the press people were chasing after her. She was in her high heels and miniskirt, and these guys are running after her with the cameras and saying, the minister denies your accusation. And she stopped and turned around and said, well, what do you think he would say? So same with Brian Kemp. I'm accusing him of removing thousands upon thousands of voters who are legal voters in the state of Georgia. And it looks like mostly voters of color.
Yeah, right.
And saying it ain't true. But here's what I'm telling you. This is Greg Palast. Don't believe me. Don't believe him. Go to gregpalast.com and type in your name, first name, last name, zip code. We'll send back your address. If that's your address or a former address, you better re-register today, right now, at the Secretary of State's website. That's sos.ga.gov. And you got to do that today and send me a note. Hey, I was removed. Because he's removing people supposedly because they have moved from the state of Georgia when they are right here. They are right here. They haven't moved to the state anywhere else. He's got people who moved to Alaska. He's got Georgians who've moved to Arizona. He's got Georgians who've moved to South Dakota. Why would you do that?
Greg, I'm going to step in here for a moment. We do have to take a quick break, but
Oh,
I
yeah.
just before we do that, though, I just want to mention about Helen. See, Helen has always been with the People's Agenda, and it's called the Coalition for the People's Agenda. But the thing is, she is involved in so many different things as well, different voting organizations and so forth. She's played a significant role.
Yes,
So,
terrific
but
person.
her normal. She is with the People's Agenda, and the People's Agenda is something that Reverend Lowry started when he stepped down as the head of SCLC.
And I want to mention that.
She was significant.
And I want to mention that I did speak to Reverend Lowry.
Okay, excellent.
And he won't be at the press conference about 90.
Yeah, he's not getting out much.
But he did say when I described what they were doing, which is taking common names. And who has common names? Jackson, Johnson, Black, Rodriguez,
Right.
Hernandez, Kim, Lee, Ho. You're getting the picture.
Right.
And all he said to me was, sounds like the same old Jim Crow.
Yeah, right.
That's
Yeah,
the
he's
whole
right.
thing
Yeah,
in
exactly.
a nutshell. So it's
Right.
the same old Jim Crow, but now it's very sophisticated. They're using computers to match names from all over the country, but they're leaving out the middle names. Can you imagine it? They are leaving out middle names. Do you know that
We're going to come back to that in a
Yeah.
minute. We're going to play a quick announcement, and we'll be back with Greg Palast in a second. Stay
Okay.
tuned. All right, again, my name is Heather Gray. The program is Just Peace. I'm here with co-producer Ernest Dunkley, and we're pleased to say that we're talking with Greg Palast, and he's just going into all this tremendous narrative and work that he's been doing all these many years. And as I said earlier, I first knew of Greg and my friend Danny Schechter, actually, when you guys were down in Florida doing all this great work on discovering what happened in Florida. That was just a travesty. But in any case, it's just been ongoing. So go ahead, Greg. Where are we now
Well,
on some
here
of this?
is, and again, I want to repeat, this is Greg Palast. I'm an investigative reporter with Rolling Stone and Democracy Now!
Thank you, yes.
For WRFG, your
Yes.
weapon of mass instruction in Atlanta. One
All
of the
right,
few
thanks.
places I can talk and actually tell you the full story.
Well, good.
And the
Go
full
for it.
story is that your Secretary of State, Brian Kemp, has been removing hundreds of thousands of people. In 2017, over 591,000 Georgians on the grounds that they've left the state. Well, guess what, Brian? I checked with the post office. I have actually, my foundation, the Palast Investigative Fund, is paying thousands of dollars to do something that Kemp should have done, which is to check with the post office to see if people have really left. And guess what? They're still here. He has disappeared these voters. Now, why would he do that? Because he got a list from Chris Kobach of Kansas, that's Trump's vote thief in chief, that said these Georgians have moved out of state. It ain't so. It's a lie. And I'm going to tell you right now, Chris Kobach is a white supremacist, and I rarely use that term. It's not something I throw around. He's with a group called FAIR. He's their counsel, which says our purpose is to maintain a European American majority in the United States. So this is what they're doing. Please go to gregpalast.com, gregpalast.com, type in your first name, your last name, and then your zip code, and I will tell you whether you've been purged from the voter rolls. So that's what's going on. So
That's great work. That's great work. It's totally unbelievable that they would think of that and get away with it without a ripple.
well, ask yourself.
Other than yourself.
Where's the Atlanta Journal-Constitution? Where is?
I don't know.
Where is
No one's seen them.
Where's National Petroleum Radio? Now I got to be careful because these guys now want to speak to me, But you know,
Well,
it's not like they
when,
didn't-
when you, I was impressed. Would you explain Kobach?
Okay,
Explain
now
explain him.
If you watch my film, and by the way,
And that's the most amazing scenario. Go ahead,
yeah,
Greg.
if you watch my film, The Best Democracy Man Can Buy, which by the way is free on Amazon
Okay,
Prime
good.
today.
Excellent. Excellent.
And a new edition came out today.
Okay, good.
And by the way, if you have an organization or group that wants to show that what we call it's the Jesse Jackson version, he commissioned a short version with all the unchurchly words taken out.
Yeah.
It's a really good film. Still, I love the film, even in the short, expurgated version. But it's in that film. I confront this guy, Chris Kobach of
Yeah,
Kansas.
it's just remarkable.
And what I do
really.
is I show him the list of Georgia that
Okay.
have been removed, voters in Georgia who've been removed, and voters in Kansas who've been removed in his
Right,
state,
right.
because he says they're the same person. And he has guys. The last name is Johnson. Now, most Johnsons in the United States of America are African American. Okay. So they have James P. Johnson, supposed to be like Peter Johnson, to be the same exact voter as James Edward Johnson. And I said, why are you matching these two people? Because what you're doing is you're saying James Johnson has moved out of Georgia to Kansas. Really? And by the way, it goes both ways. They said that James P. Johnson has moved out of Kansas to Georgia. Both these guys can lose their vote under this game. Now what they do is they say, oh, well, what's the big deal? We send them a postcard. Now it looks like junk mail. The postcard looks like junk mail. And when you get this postcard, 8 out of 10 people throw it away. Now when you throw it away, you can lose your vote, especially if you fail to vote in an election. That's another reason to vote in this election, because in Georgia, if you don't show up to vote in 1 or 2 elections, they won't let you vote in the 3rd election.
Wow.
So
Is that
understand, they're not supposed to do that, but they do. And if they, because
Well, what do you mean they're not supposed to do that? But they're
the
doing.
National,
I mean,
the National
should-
Voter Registration
should-
Act of 1993
should action
says-
be taken against the powers that be that are doing that?
So I'm
or
suing.
What?
That's why I'm suing.
That's
them.
why you're
That's
suing.
unbelievable.
And so now we got SCLC, we've got Push, Operation Rainbow Push. We've got, I heard that SCLC is leading the charge, and we have NAACP. I was just informed a minute ago is joining us.
At the press conference tomorrow, and I just want
Yeah.
everybody to know the press conference will be tomorrow at 11 o'clock, and it'll be at the SCLC headquarters, which I'm going to give you the address, which is 320 Auburn Avenue, actually.
Right,
So-
and we will have there, I'm going to be talking to the press, I'm going to be showing them the charts, I'm going to be giving them names of people who are still here in Georgia who should have never been removed because they're relying on this Chris Kobach racist list.
But Greg, here's the thing also that I want to say, I want you to explain this to people now, and then we want to do it again, and maybe again. People need to check to see if they're on the voting roll, right? So
Okay,
please
I'm gonna
explain
tell
this
you
process.
Once again, I want you right now. I mean, not later, put down
Because October 9th is
Put
the
down
last
your-
day to register. October
put down
the 9th.
your Angry Birds and put down that toy, and I want you to go to gregpalast.com or on your phone or wherever you want. Go to gregpalast.com. Type in your first name, type in your last name, type in your zip code, and we will send you, anyone with your first, last name, and zip code, the address or addresses
Okay.
of the people who've been removed, had their from the voter rolls, if you've been canceled. And if your name is there, you got to do 2 things right away. Number 1, send me a note. Hey, I was canceled. I want to know. Want to make sure that.
And give your email
give me
address
the-
again.
And you just go
Oh.
to gregpalast.com. When you get on
Okay,
that list,
okay.
it'll say you're canceled.
Okay, all right.
And you just say contact Greg, and an email will pop up. It's real easy. And then you click on another link that takes you to the Secretary of State of Georgia, and you have 1 week to register. Now here's the sad news. The reason I want you to do it now is if you wait till the last day or the last couple days, it's very unlikely that Brian Kemp is going to accept your registration.
Okay.
He doesn't want you to register, and he can come up with all kinds of grounds that they couldn't verify your address, something like that. So do not wait, because
Right.
technically you have a week, but if you don't register in the next couple days, frankly, I think you can kiss your vote goodbye. Because what's going to happen is you're going to show up at the voting booth, and they're going to give you something called a provisional ballot, which is what I call a placebo ballot, because it lets you think you voted, because you fill out this paper, but they're not going to count the votes, so you haven't voted. So it's a placebo ballot. But they say, don't worry, we'll give you a provisional ballot, we'll count that later. No, they won't. So what you have to do is make sure that you are on the voter rolls right now by going to gregpalast.com, first name, last name, zip code. If we send you a note, you've been canceled, my God, right then, click a button, send me a message, click another button, re-register, do it.
You can do it
now.
online, right?
Yeah, you re-register online. Don't fill out one of those paper forms.
Okay.
Brian Kemp throws those out. I kid you not. He throws them out. Go online, make sure you're confirmed, and then, you know, if you can, take a screenshot or do something to make sure that that you've got a confirmation that you registered online. I know that people like filling out pieces of paper, but Kemp is not going to accept those.
Wow.
And, you know, here's the problem. Look, one thing we haven't mentioned, the elephant, the Republican elephant in the room, is Brian Kemp is running for governor. Okay, so here you have a situation in which the guy who's running for governor
It's controlling the votes.
He's deciding who gets to vote, where you get to vote,
that's the most amazing
when you get
thing.
to vote,
Exactly.
whether there's early voting, whose votes count. You know, after, because there's going to be all these disputed votes. See, in Britain, when my network BBC reports results of elections, we not only say, okay, so many votes for the Tories, so many votes for the Labour Party. We also, so many votes were not counted for the following reasons: unreadable, destroyed ballot, blank ballot, something. That's never reported here. Because in Georgia, you have tens of thousands of votes that are cast and never counted in Georgia between provisional ballots and what they call spoiled ballots that they say that they can't read. And it's always, and the chance that your vote will spoil is 900% higher if you're black than if you're white, because they give you bad machines. In Detroit, go watch my film. And again, it's free on Amazon Prime. Download it. Or go to gregpalast.com.
The best democracy money can buy.
The best democracy money can buy. The Case of the Stolen Election. The new edition came out today, and you can also get it in DVD. The thing is, in that, okay, I have a new section where I went to Michigan for Democracy Now! For Amy, and I found out that 75,355 ballots were cast and never counted. Repeat, 75,355 ballots were cast and never counted. They had paper ballots. People say, oh, what, we can't have computers, we want paper ballots. Well, guess what? That doesn't save you, because they use machines to read the paper ballots. And the scanning machines are supposed to read the paper ballots. 87 of them broke down in Detroit.
Wow.
Now they claim, well, we don't know who people, the machines couldn't read the ballots, so we don't know who these people voted for. Well, who do you think those votes for were in Motown? Do you think that they were for Agent Orange? I don't think so. We know who those votes were for. And by the way, Jill Stein, when Jill Stein paid for the, what was called the recount.
Who was also running for president.
Who was running for president at the time. She wasn't actually paying for a recount. It's a misnomer. She was paying to get those 75,000 ballots counted.
Yeah, right.
And because you can count, you can look at them, and the human eyeball can look at them even when the machine breaks down. And Trump's lawyers went to court and said, hey, Jill Stein can't get those ballots read because you can read all those ballots 20 times. She'll never win Michigan. Only Hillary Clinton can complain. And so Hillary Clinton's lawyers were in the court. The judge said, well, what does Secretary Clinton want? Your client. Does she want to count these ballots or not? And their answer was, and this is a quote, we're only here to observe.
All right, Greg, listen, I actually had someone, you were giving all this great instruction, actually, on how to get information about whether or not you're registered.
Right.
And I did have someone calling asking for the spelling of your name.
Okay.
So
G-R-E-G, Greg, Palast, P as in Paul, A-L-A, S as in Sam, T as in Tom, Palast. So it's all one word, gregpalast.com, gregpalast.com.
great. And I want everyone out there to know that you are listening to WRFG Atlanta 89.3 FM. My name is Heather Gray, and I'm here with co-producer Ernest Dunkley, and the program is Just Peace, and we're talking with investigative journalist Greg Palast, and he's just been doing all this great investigative journalism for so long. I mean, it's so impressive, Greg. You're the nation's expert on voting issues. I've decided, actually. You're the one. I mean,
by default. I mean,
by
I've
default.
actually,
I mean, how did you get involved in the first? I always wondered, how'd you get involved with what you did in Florida?
It was crazy. Here I'm working for BBC. I'm in England. I'm living in London.
Yeah, right.
And I'm working with BBC Television. I'm an investigative reporter for The Guardian as well. And I'm watching the returns come in Florida in 2000.
You thought it seemed strange.
And it was strange. And you had black people who were saying, I tried to vote, but they said I wasn't on the voter rolls. And there was like 2, 3, 4 of those stories. And I'm going,
what's
wait
going
a
on?
minute. and the first thing I think, and in my kind of conspiracy mind, and by the way, I'm not a conspiracy nut. I'm a conspiracy expert. I used to work on conspiracy cases for the U.S. Justice Department. And the first
I never
thing
knew that, actually.
Yeah, it's true. And in my mind, I'm thinking maybe there's some kind of computer program that's wiping black people off the voter rolls. I know it sounded crazy, but I got a hold of the program in Catherine Harris's office. At that time, 2 CD-ROM discs.
And Catherine Harris was?
Catherine Harris was the Secretary of State. She was the Brian Kemp of Florida.
That's
back
a good
in
point.
2000.
That's a good point.
And she had removed voters who she claimed were felons, but she played the same game as Brian Kemp is doing, saying people who've moved out of state. She just found people, like literally people named John Johnson. And the middle names would be different. She'd say, John Johnson's convicted in Ohio of a crime, and John Johnson of Florida must be the same guy, so we're going to remove his vote. And so there wasn't a single illegal voter on that list. I asked the Attorney General at the time, I said, would you arrest, here's illegal voters? He says, are you kidding? Of course I would. I said, well, here's Catherine Harris's list of 58,000 illegal voters. He says, oh yeah, that's Harris's funky list. He says, that's a joke. I said, are you investigating any of it? He says, yeah, well, we looked through the 58,000 names. We found 6 suspects, and none of the cases panned out. 0. 6 suspects out of 58,000, and none of those cases panned out. It was 0. And I remember in my film, in fact, I turned that story of the Florida felon purge into a cartoon. The guy who did, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, who drew Who Framed Roger Rabbit, he made a cartoon for me, so it's not boring history. The best democracy money can buy is not boring. If it's
no,
anything,
it's
not boring.
It's true.
And
it's true.
It's like Michael Moore, except with humor and information. I should say, Michael and I just had a. And by the way, I'll make it up to you, Michael. Yes, he and I just got together, and he's going to be helping me on this journey.
Oh, excellent, excellent,
and
excellent.
Michael's film, by the way, Fahrenheit 11/9,
Mm-hmm.
his section on what happened in Flint, Michigan is probably some of the best documentary filming. So I have this cartoon. And about Catherine Harris removing these voters. But then for real, you get to meet one of the victims, Willie Steen. He's a Gulf War veteran, nice kid, nice guy. He's a veteran, unlike George Bush. And he was removed from the voter rolls because his name is Willie Steen. Willie Steen. His name is Willie Steen. And there was a guy named Willie Osteen, who is white, by the way, who was convicted of a felony in Ohio. And they said, that's the same guy. And by the way, when I'm saying black voters are removed more than white voters, I'm not guessing, because in Georgia and Florida, it says BLA next to your name if you're black. Now, that's, by the way, that was required by the Voting Rights Act as a way to help monitor whether they're still stealing the votes of black folk. But it's become a way.
They're using it a way to.
Once computers come in, they're using those designations to help them search and destroy the black voter.
So BLA is by the name of a lot of folks who are black then and registered to vote, you're saying?
Yeah.
Just generally on these lists.
In Georgia and in Florida.
Because I thought that one of the ways they were taking people off the poll, and they wanted to take black folks off the rolls, I think, was to use this scenario of similar names.
Yes, because 85, and here's an interesting statistics. You can use that at a cocktail party to win a bet. 85 of the 100 most common last names in America are minority names. So Jackson, Rodriguez, Kim, and by the way, yes, now this is a big thing in Georgia. In Georgia's 6th district, the reason Karen Handel won, I did this investigation for Democracy Now! The reason Karen Handel won is that they blocked the votes of Korean Americans, which
Right.
are huge in the 6, because that's your
Outrageous.
Silicon
Right.
kind of Silicon Highway
Right.
going up to Alpharetta. You have a huge Korean American community, and they just there's a group that was called 10,000 Koreans Vote. They were registering 10,000 Korean Americans, and they got raided at the demand of Brian Kemp by the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. I mean, they treated people getting voter registrations as criminals. They scared the hell out of the Korean American community, basically frightened some of the leaders into stopping the registration drive. They not only stopped the registration drive, but then they didn't put people's names on the registration rolls who were registered on those pieces of paper, which is why I say don't use a piece of paper. Register right online at SOS, that means Secretary of State, sos.ga.gov. That's where you register to vote. And by the way, even if you haven't been canceled, if you just haven't registered, and I'm talking to my daughter who lives here.
To make sure she registers. Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And all you have to do is go online to the Secretary of State's office.
The Georgia Secretary of State's
Georgia
office, and you
Secretary
can
of State,
register
right.
online. Okay.
Now, if you go to gregpalast.com, you can find out if you've been canceled. But if you think you never got around to registering, just go straight to the sos.ga.gov and register right now online. Don't fill out pieces of paper. Brian Kemp throw those things away, and it is racial. Because why are they going after the Korean American voters? Well, if you look at my film, I have a whole section called Voting Gangnam Style, where we have where young Korean Americans were like doing this Vote Gangnam Style dance
right.
to convince their elders to register to vote.
Yeah.
And then in my film, Pop, 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 the Korean voters, I say they're starting to vote like they've turned black. And there you have John Lewis, dancing Gangnam Style, in my film.
Right.
That's an exclusive, man.
Right, it is.
Really is. John
Yeah.
Lewis is dancing Gangnam Style in my film because it was to illustrate a simple point. Korean Americans who used to vote mostly Republican, the Asian
Right.
American community.
Yes, usually
voted
Republican, yeah.
And now they have switched to vote about 75% Democratic.
That's
And-
why they're being targeted,
and
right?
suddenly they're targeted.
Yeah.
And this is one of the problems. So they're using this common name game. You know, when you talk about the Korean American community, Lee, Ho, Kim, you know, it's
Very
Park.
common names. Very
And so
common.
there's very few last names. And they do the same with the black community. The history of slavery
right.
is that you end up with a lot of Jacksons.
Yeah, right.
And that's the game that they play. And this is Greg Palast. And I'm asking you again, go to gregpalast.com, GregPalast, gregpalast.com. Type in your first name, your last name. It's right at the top of the site, your zip code, and you'll find out whether Brian Kemp canceled your voter registration. And you might say, oh, I voted the same place 30 years, big deal. No. I
You have
can't
to
tell
check
you.
it.
People
Yeah.
are always crying. We just had a primary in New York. And I can tell you how many people contact me and said, I've been voting forever. I've always voted, no problem. And suddenly I'm told I'm not on the voter rolls. Well, I told you to check. I'm
Yeah.
telling you to check right now.
Right. I'm sorry.
I'm curious, how come the American Civil Liberties Union hasn't...
We're working.
this seems to be a crime of great proportion because this affects everything that's called democracy. So,
Well, the ACLU, in fact, a lot of ACLU attorneys are helping out in different states. I was just meeting with the head of the Kansas ACLU, and in California, the head of the Southern California ACLU. Now, we got a lot of really good attorneys working with us on this, and but right now we have a terrific firm out of New York, so we don't need the ACLU yet, because also remember they have limited resources, so we're using a big law.
but it
firm
would seem that
that's
someone would have brought up charges against, it's
We're heading in that direction.
that would
I
be
wanna-
organized crime in
It is,
the
that's
crime
true.
world. That's
That's
organized crime.
It is.
In fact, look, I used to, when I was at Justice Department, I did racketeering cases. And very frankly, this is the definition of racketeering. When you have a conspiracy against the public.
Yeah.
When you have Chris Kobach of Kansas and Brian Kemp here in Georgia.
Right.
And together they are coming up with these funky lists saying Georgians have moved out of state. Ooh, we made a mistake. We didn't realize that you, John Jackson, are different than John Jackson in Alaska, even though you have different middle names. And I kid you not, there are over 500 guys named James Brown on their hit list.
Really?
500
Wow.
James Brown. And Kemp has given me a lot of information because we sent him a 90-day notice that he'd be hauled into federal court. He had 90 days under the law.
If he didn't give you the information.
89th day, he sends us all these computer files, including the names of
the
all
89th day.
The 89th day, he sends us all the computer
Wow.
files of people he's removed from the voter rolls. Now, here's a weird one. No middle names. Now, that's really weird. You know why? He knows why he's not giving me the middle names. Because he knows that I know that he's been using that cross-check list with people who have mismatched middle names.
Right.
He doesn't want me to know this. But guess what? I've got some really big computers. And we're putting these lists together. I mean, it's not cheap. My foundation, the Palast Investigative Fund, does this. And we're, it's not easy to do. But you know what, Brian? That's what you were supposed to do. You're Secretary of State. You're supposed to. Why am I going to the post office checking people's addresses? Why am I asking? You know what? He's removing people saying that they've left Georgia and they're still paying Georgia taxes. Like what's going on here? And you know it, Brian. You know it, Brian. And I'm going to tell you something. People have asked me, how come you're doing this now, just before the election? Isn't that partisan? Well, let me tell you something else. Do you really want me to keep this information secret and let him basically steal an election? No. If the people of Georgia want Brian Kemp and you want to vote for him, that's your problem. That's not my problem. Well, that's my daughter's problem. She lives here. But if I got to tell you.
Have you tried to talk with him?
Oh, yes, sir. I have many times tried to talk to Brian Kemp. And he's absolutely refused to speak to me.
I see.
So I'm going to, I'm pretty good at hunting these guys down. I think that Mr. Kemp is going to find himself talking to me whether he wants to or not.
Let me ask you this, Greg. Here, I want to stay on Georgia, but just for a moment, just to diverge here. We're talking about Georgia, but this has been happening in a lot of other states. I'm particularly interested in the South. I mean,
yes.
Where's this? It's been happening in Alabama. Where? In Alabama, Mississippi?
The southern states. Jim Crow has not left. He's now just Dr. James Crow, cyber expert, and computer expert.
I love it.
That's
Dr. James
reality.
Crow.
Yeah, that's what's going on now. Okay, so they're usually sophisticated man. They don't. So they say, oh, we're not removing black voters because they're black. It's because they moved to Alaska, or they're felons, or whatever cockamamie thing that they come up with. They're inactive voters. They forgot to vote. No, it's like something like that. So we have. By the way, I just found out that Florida's back to the felon voter game. The other thing
they are?
The other thing that Florida, yes. The other thing that Florida tried to do was remove people saying that they're not citizens. Anyone named Hernandez or Rodriguez,
they're not citizens.
They were claiming that they're not citizens.
Wow.
And playing the name game again because the Department of Homeland Security, which is ICE deports some guy named Jose Garcia back to Salvador. Okay? Then state of Florida says, oh, there's a Jose Garcia on our voter rolls. Now, by the way, there are 832,000 Garcias in the United States. That's an exact number. 832,000 Garcias in the United States. But they'll take that Jose Garcia that was deported, and they'll remove Jose Garcia from Gainesville, Florida voter rolls. And that's the game. And they listen to this. The state of Florida, Rick Scott, who's currently running for Senate, when he was governor, he targeted 181,000 Hispanic voters in Florida. 181,000, and said they were suspected alien voters. 181,000 Americans who were just guilty of being Hispanic, and 181,000. And guess what? They did find and convict one person, one single foreign alien voter, a Republican from Austria. I kid you not, a Republican from Austria. And that's the only illegal foreign voter.
When was that?
That was in 2012. And they're trying that game again. And if Kavanaugh gets on the court, that's all going to be permitted. So look out. See, people talk about Kavanaugh.
Oh, that's a good.
And people are forgetting.
Why is that?
Because Kavanaugh.
He's going to go after the Voting Rights Act.
Kavanaugh is one. People are. I know people are kind of focused on Roe v. Wade.
Right.
He doesn't care about Roe v. Wade. He couldn't care less.
Yeah.
So he's willing to give that up to keep Roe v. Wade to get the votes of Murkowski and Collins. So he get the two female Republicans by saying, oh, I'm going to keep Roe v. Wade. The problem is he's going to take away your voting rights, and then you're going to lose Roe v. Wade anyway, because once the GOP has control of every arm and tentacle of government, you won't have Roe v. Wade as a practical matter. You can't get an abortion in Kansas. There were two doctors. One was murdered, and one they stripped her of her license to practice. So what's happening is, but Brett Kavanaugh is a guy who has an ultra right wing view of the law, far to the right of Scalia. Scalia was scared of this guy, just so you know.
Oh, was he really?
Yes. So Brett Kavanaugh has taken the position that the original court rulings over 100 years old, which allowed government to regulate industry, he says that original decision was wrong. According to Brett Kavanaugh, there should be no EPA, that the government has no right to limit polluters. The government has no right to require safety in the workplace. The government has no right to regulate drugs and safety of drugs. The government has no right to regulate any of these things. He's so far to the right, he's like invisible even to the right-wing court we've got. So that's what's the danger with Brett Kavanaugh. And look out for your voting rights. The Voting Rights Act is going to go down. And watch, I'm making this prediction now. I'm suing into the Voting Rights, the Voter Registration Act of 1993. I think that's going to go down. Chris Kobach was slapped down by federal judges because he said you have to prove you're a citizen to vote. I mean, that might sound intelligent. Yeah, only citizens should vote. But guess what? We ain't Red China. We don't have citizenship cards in the United States of America. So how do what is a citizenship card?
Sure.
How do you prove you're an American? There's really two pieces of paper. One is a birth certificate, and apparently students don't have those things. They don't know where their family put their birth certificates.
Greg, we're going to take a quick break.
Yeah.
Be back in just a moment.
Okay.
Stay tuned. Again, my name is Heather Gray. The program is Just Peace, and I'm here with co-producer Ernest Dunkley. We're talking with Greg Palast. Greg, you just always have such a wealth of information here. Thanks for sharing that about Kavanaugh.
Yeah.
Scalia was move up to the mic there. Okay. Scalia was afraid of him?
Yeah, because, see, they had different views. Scalia did believe that government does have a right to regulate industry, but that it's limited.
Right.
You know, I mean, believe me and Scalia would not see eye to eye.
The best of friends.
But we wouldn't see eye to eye. This, I mean, but he did believe that government has a right. That in a democracy, we have the right to set the rules. But Kavanaugh literally believes, he has this like super libertarian view, that government has no right. So, I mean, as far as he's concerned, the EPA should not exist. You can pollute as much as you want.
Wow.
I'm not even sure that he's saying that you can have speed limits. The problem is that, we'll see how far he would go on this court, but this is really, really dangerous stuff. And again, if this Greg Palast talking, an investigative reporter with Rolling Stone, Democracy Now!, and I'm asking you to go right now to gregpalast.com, GREGPALAST. And no, I'm not asking you to buy anything. I'm asking you to put in your first name, your last name, and your zip code at the top of the site. And if you're a Georgian, you will find out if Brian Kemp, your Secretary of State, has canceled your registration. 1 in 10 Georgians lost their right to vote in 2017, and not one was notified. If you are on the list, you're going to do two things. It says click contact Greg. He'll send a note to me. Hey, I was on that cancellation list. And B, the second step you're going to take is you're going to click the other link that takes you right to Brian Kemp's office, and you're going to re-register to vote. That's how you defeat his system. You re-register to vote, and you got to do it this week. Otherwise, you are out of luck.
We want to encourage all of you listening out there to tell this to your friends as well.
Please send the list to your friends. And by the way, while you're at it, watch a movie. The Best Democracy Money Can Buy, The Case of the Stolen Election. This is how Donald Trump actually stole the election.
Right.
With the help of Brian Kemp.
Right.
And his buddies. You know, there's no reason why Georgia is a red state. You think about it. I was talking to Martin Luther King III. He says, why is Georgia given... By the way, Georgia is becoming the first southern minority majority state. That is the first state in the South where most of the residents... Most of the citizens are minority.
Will be minority.
Yeah, and so how is it that this state is
and it's
in
one
the
of the
Republican column? The answer is because they're not letting people vote, and when you vote, they take you off the voter rolls. So please protect yourself. GregPalast.com, first name, last name, zip code, and we'll get you the information. And watch that film, because there's a lot of Georgia in The Best Democracy Money Can Buy, because I find Georgia just a fertile ground for the new Jim Crow operation. Brian Kemp is really, the real, him and Chris Kobach of Kansas, Donald Trump's vote thief in chief. The two of them are buddy-buddy, and they're using the same methods to purge their voter rolls, to get rid of voters that they don't like, to not add your name to the voter rolls, and, challenge you. You're not a citizen. You don't vote here. Go to sos.ga.gov, and the reason is they don't want you to vote. And if they don't want you to vote, that's why you got to vote, because that means your vote is valuable. They're only stealing your vote because it's worth something.
Yeah, that's really interesting because they obviously do recognize the worth, the value of the vote.
Yeah, I'm
right?
tired of people saying, and by the way, a lot of people say, well, Greg Palast, you're always saying, they're stealing our votes, so why should I bother to vote? They're going to steal it anyway. Well, they can't steal all the votes all the time.
Right.
And I got to tell you, when in 12, when I was doing the investigation, and I was writing for Rolling Stone, with my co-author is Bobby Kennedy, and he can do something I can't do. He can call up Barack Obama on his BlackBerry. So he called up Obama and said, do you know all the stuff that Greg Palast is doing? He says, of course I do. And he said, well, why aren't you saying anything about it? He says, no. It was Obama's view that what you got to do is overwhelm the steal. He said, his view is, and you have to understand.
You got to do what?
You got to overwhelm the steal. So, in other words, don't whine that you can't win with 51% of the vote. You got to win 56% of the vote. Do what he did. Crush them. Roll over them. So they can't steal all the votes all the time. But one, protect your own vote, for gosh sakes.
Yeah.
Go to gregpalast.com, write first name, last name, see if you're on the cancellation list. If you're not sure you're registered at all, go to sos.ga.gov and register. Just overwhelm them. And, of course, you can't just register. You got to show up. And I really strongly recommend early voting. Solstice polls day, Sunday before voting, you got to get in there, because if there is a problem, you may have time to get that straightened out. So vote early, vote in person if you can. If you can't, yes, go ahead and do that mail-in ballot. I'm telling you, though, that's one game that they play in Georgia, too. They throw away a lot of mail-in ballots. They disqualify them on all these cockamamie reasons. Postage due, for example. Make sure you may have to put 2 stamps on that thing.
Can you say anything else about the lawsuit?
And about the lawsuit, so I am filing with, that's a good point. Tomorrow we're holding a press conference at the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Dr. Charles Steele, who's president of SCLC, is hosting me, and we're going to have Operation Rainbow Push Joe Beasley. Right. By the way, Reverend Jackson's coming later this week, and he'll give us a boost too.
Excellent.
And
excellent.
And he's my old crony of mine from Chicago.
Right.
We go way back. And he's on the suit, too, with me in Illinois, where he votes. And we are suing Brian Kemp to reveal all the ways he's been removing these voters, that he's given me the cancellation list. He had no choice under threat of a lawsuit, but he didn't give me everything that he's supposed to give me, including how exactly he came up with these names. But you know what, Brian?
What court are you suing him in?
U.S. federal court.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, so here in Atlanta.
Yeah.
And so, that's the thing. He was playing games with me on the Open Records Act of Georgia. You're supposed to have open records here. It's your government. It's not Brian Kemp's government, okay? So he was resisting. So I gave up with your Open Records Act, because he's closed the Open Records Act. So instead, I got a big name lawyer, Jeannie Meyer, out of New York, to say, well, Mr. Kemp, we are going to haul your behind into a federal court. And you know what that means, because you can ask your friend Chris Kobach what happened when he went into a federal court. The judge not only did he lose on the law, but the judge fined him what will be hundreds of thousands of dollars personally for contempt of court, and even ordered him back to law school. So that might happen to Kemp too. So Kemp does not want, so because Kemp doesn't want to go to court, he sent me a bunch of stuff like, oh, here's a bunch of stuff. And I said, you know what, Brian? That's a bunch of stuff, but that ain't everything we asked for. No, not good enough. You gave us enough to hang you, because what you didn't know, Brian, I asked him for the cross-check lists he got from Chris Kobach, and he didn't give them to me. But you know what, Brian? I've got them. because Greg Palast is an investigative reporter. You watch the film, The Best Democracy Money Can Buy. It's free on Amazon Prime.
So explain again precisely why he's being sued. I mean, he gave you these lists, right?
He gave the list, but we asked him for the cross-check list that he got from Chris Kobach. We asked him for how he put those two lists
together.
Exactly.
Sure.
I want all the details and all the paperwork.
Right.
I want to know who he sent
Which he has not
postcards
done.
to.
Yeah,
these
okay.
cockamamie postcards. Who returned them, and what steps he took to say that James Brown of Atlanta is the same James Brown. First and last name, that's the only match, with some guy in Detroit. And so I need the rest of the information, Brian. You know it, I know it. You're going to have to tell the judge why you're withholding this information. You know what he's trying to do? He's trying to get past the election.
Sure.
He's trying to see if he can, sneak
And he's
this
close.
one,
It's close.
tiptoe past the election. But, that's why I'm calling you out on it now. That's why I'm putting this cancellation list up online now. And those who say, oh, it's political, he's running for office, you shouldn't do it. Well, if I'm silent, think about this. Am I supposed to be silent and in effect enter into a conspiracy with Brian Kemp to defraud the voters of Georgia? I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
Not at all.
Good work.
Well, Greg,
Good
our
work.
time has just gone so quickly. I mean, you always just have such a wealth of information,
Oh, yeah.
So, and I'm wanting to personally thank you for all your great work on this, too.
You're very welcome, and
it's-
Ernest. I want to thank you for joining me today and for providing me
Wouldn't have missed it at all.
the cheese crackers.
And we'll see you at the press conference tomorrow as well. And we look forward to keeping up to date on what's happening with the work that you're doing, Greg.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, so thank you again.
And thank you for having me on this wonderful Radio Free Georgia, WRFG, your weapon of mass instruction.
That's
All
right.
right. And that's true.
And I'm going to ask everyone to stay tuned for Revolutionary African Perspectives. Stay tuned.